Coming up on Dr. Kiki Science Hour, we're going to be talking about spacey happenings with Tariq Malik from space.com. That's coming up on Dr. Kiki Science Hour.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Dr. Kiki's Science Hour is provided by Cachefly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Dr. Kiki Science Hour, episode 78, recorded on Thursday, January 6th, 2011. This year in space. This is Dr. Kiki's Science Hour. Welcome, everybody, to yet another episode. Happy New Year. It's 2011, and this is our first episode of the new year, episode number 78. Are you ready? You ready for it? You ready to get down and dirty with the science? Oh, yeah. Well, today, we're going to space. We're going to be talking about what happened last year in space, what events were noteworthy. Let's kind of do a review, a recap of 2010. And I'd also like to look at what's going to be happening in the year ahead. What do you have to look forward to? What are events that you should pay attention to and be aware of coming up on your calendar? And also, what are some of the things that might pop up in the space science category of fun? With us today to talk about all these wonderful, I guess, past lives of space science and the premonitions for the future is Tariq Malik. He's the managing editor at space.com. Thank you, Tariq, for joining us today. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day.
Well, thanks for having us.
You're welcome. Now, you started at space.com in 2001. You've been there for ages. You started out as a staff writer, became an editor. Now you're the managing editor. Can you tell me how the emphasis of space.com, what space.com is all about, how has that evolved over the decade now that you've been working there?
That's right. You know, when we first started back in '99, before I actually had arrived, it was mostly just space research and the NASA's human spaceflight program, kind of covering both of those different genres at the same time. And in the last 8 years since I've been there, of course, there's been a NASA tragedy, the Columbia accident, and this evolving field of private human spaceflight, private human research. There's folks that are building their own rockets just to launch because it's fun, out of iPhones and balloons and stuff that they can find at the hobby shop. Mm-hmm. And then at the same time, you've got millionaires who are paying through the nose to fly to the International Space Station. That was a huge thing in the last decade for us, as well as these guys that are building their own spaceships to take maybe one day you and I and your baby into space.
Yeah, that's one thing that maybe not myself, but knowing that my children could potentially be easily not having to pay millions of dollars, but could easily be exploring space as a tourist or scientist or otherwise. It's such an exciting prospect.
Yeah, and now I think in the last couple of years, we've actually seen the test flights too, which has been, I think, the big shift before from things going from being in pictures on paper, illustrations and whatnot, to actually seeing these things actually fly. People that you can talk to who are up there, and they're not trained astronauts; they're just pilots or financiers, if you will.
Right. I love the democratization. First, it was the internet, that started to democratize information, and now we have the democratization of space, where just about anyone from a school child to a millionaire can send something into space, and it's so exciting, so exciting. Yeah. You don't need millions of dollars to do it, to get excited about space and be a part of exploring the universe. In 2010 specifically, there were a couple of really neat, talking about commercial spaceflight, there were a couple of really neat events that occurred. Can you kind of give us an overview of what those were and what happened?
Yeah, and there was a kind of a mix between big efforts and then the space tourism side of it over the last year. In 2010, we saw the first successful launch of a company in California. They're called SpaceX. They launched a rocket called their Falcon 9 into space first in the summer, and then they capped the year in December with a second launch of that same rocket. And it had the world's first private space capsule on it. It's a gumdrop shaped spaceship. They won a contract with NASA to provide cargo flights to the International Space Station. They want to refit this spaceship to carry people, not just astronauts, but maybe you and I or the public in the future. And that was a huge milestone for private human spaceflight, for commercial spaceflight in general, because a lot of people didn't think that they'd be able to do it. They launched their first rockets a couple of years ago. 4 of them failed until the fifth one came around. And so there was a lot riding on it. And of course, at the same time, there was a big backlash in the U.S. government about commercial spaceflight and how it's going to be a big part of NASA's future plan. So this kind of was an answer to that backlash. You know, they can do it. The private industry can do it. And they're ready to move forward. At the same time, Sir Richard Branson, out in the UK, he has a company called Virgin Galactic. It's very exciting. They're building not a rocket per se, but it's a winged space plane. And it goes underneath a mothership. They take off from a runway. They go up to the high atmosphere, launch a rocket from there into space, and then it comes back like an airplane, like the space shuttle would do. It doesn't get to orbit, but the views are amazing. And they started doing their first test flights in 2010 as well. It was a really kind of exciting year for commercial spaceflight.
Thinking about the interface between government-funded flight and programs and the commercial spaceflight, we're looking at this year, NASA shutting down the space shuttle program. And last year, there was a lot of news that the Obama administration would be killing the Constellation program. How have those events in the federal government-funded sphere of spaceflight affected this commercial sphere?
Well, there's a lot riding on commercial spaceflight for NASA right now. They've publicly come out and they're really trying to rely on that as part of this new NASA plan. So seeing the successes that came out from SpaceX, there's some other folks that are testing their engines now. Seeing those successes are kind of a shot in the arm for NASA. And then also NASA put out some new contracts and new calls for other companies like Boeing and a few others to pitch their own ideas. I think at the end of 2010, in this new round of their search, Virgin Galactic teamed up with another company to come up with their own ideas as well for crew transport with NASA. So they're kind of intertwined right now and interdependent with the space shuttle fleet retiring this year. There's only a few flights left, maybe 3 at the most by the end of the summer. And after for 30 years, there have been space shuttle flights, and after that, there won't be any anymore. And the U.S. will be without its own independent access to space until these private space liners, spaceships become available.
Yeah. What do you think about the private spaceships that are being developed? Would you go on a trip at the point that they are now if they were taking a crew and you were offered a spot? Would you take it now this year?
I would find it hard not to at least go through the training and check out the spaceship. I would like to see a couple of successful test flights by professional pilots before maybe I get on, just like the FAA would require any experimental aircraft. I can't say I would turn that down. That would be an amazing opportunity. My wife might have something to say about it, I think.
Yeah, maybe. Don't you think you should think about this a little bit more?
That's right.
Beta testing a spaceship? What? Are you crazy?
I'll tell you, though, anything that gives us more spaceships rather than less is pretty amazing. It's not easy to do. Only 3 countries in the world have built and flown people in space on their own spacecraft. Russia, the U.S., and China. And now you have these upstart companies that are building their own spaceships and will really open up the amount of flights that go into space. Maybe there's the Virgin Galactic spaceship, I should mention, seats 8 people. That's NASA launches 7 astronauts on an average shuttle flight and Russia's Soyuz and China's Shenzhou spacecraft, they carry 3 people apiece. So you've got almost immediately an 8-person spaceship that's just going to hopefully making routine flights on a regular basis. The SpaceX capsule, the manned version of it, will carry 7 people as well. So if they become routine and they succeed in these efforts, the amount of people that are going to fly in space in the next 50 years of human spaceflight is going to vastly outnumber what we've seen in the last 50 years of human spaceflight.
Yeah, so far it's just been limited to astronauts, cosmonauts, and people who had the money to be able to buy a spot.
That's right. You can count the number of civilians, people who've paid their way into space on, using 2 hands, and it's less than 10. And I think one guy flew twice. So,
I really want to go again. This will be great. Yeah. Have you've been through some astronaut training yourself, right?
Well, I've been to space camp a few times.
Yeah.
And one of our staff writers, Clara Moskowitz, actually in 2010 went down to NASTAR on the I think they're in Virginia, and they offer suborbital astronaut training for scientists, for folks that are going to be flying on these private spacecraft. And she had a great time. They get up in a jumpsuit, they go in the centrifuge, they learn about how to prepare your body for the G-forces and whatnot. And I mean, it's pretty much like an adult space camp, if you will.
Sounds awesome.
But for real.
How do you know how much that costs?
I believe they cost anywhere between $3,000 and $5,000, depending on what you're going to be using it for per session. Because there's different stages. She went on the centrifuge, and they have a hyperbaric chamber to practice high altitude breathing and whatnot. But there's another level where they get in ejection seats and practice that super acceleration types of scenarios for the flights that you would take.
That sounds like so much fun. It's just what an interesting thing to do. You're like, I think I'm going to put my body to the ultimate test. Let's see if I can take the highest altitudes and maximum G-forces and not throw up. This sounds like fun. What a good thing to spend money on.
I think she did something like 9 Gs at one time.
Oh my gosh!
She did it in a circle, and the camera's watching you the whole time, and you see like in those commercials where your face gets all flat.
Yeah.
I don't know how flattering that might be if everyone does it, but it was certainly exciting to see, I guess, the average person, what it was like to feel the pressure to go through it. You don't really hear about that too much in terms of like the public getting a chance to do that.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the amount of money. It's $3,000 to $5,000 is something. It's not as much as the $200,000 that the spaceship to the Virgin Galactic flights are going to cost. So you can at least get the experience of what it would be like, or the training would be like. $200,000 potentially sometime in the next. Do you think in the next couple of years? I mean, 2011, this year, they're going to do another test flight of the Spaceship Two.
That's right. And in 2011, Spaceship Two, they're expecting to actually light the rocket engine and at least fly up into suborbital space like they're planning. We don't know the timeline for that, but they've done a lot in the last year that we weren't expecting. So it's entirely possible that by 2012, like Richard Branson has said, they're going to start launching the first passengers into space.
That's going to be I'm sure people are just clamoring for that. That'll be so great.
Yeah, their waiting list is hundreds of people long already. They've got millions of dollars in deposits already. So I think if you want to fly in the next 5 years, you should probably put your deposit down now.
Wow. I personally, I still haven't. I'm one of those people who I kind of wait for people to beta test things before I jump in. I still don't have an iPad. I don't know if I'm going to get an iPhone. I'm not into jumping into that stuff until it's been proven technology. Yeah. So I think I might wait 10 years from now, maybe, if I have $200,000.
That's right. In 10 years from now, it might be cheaper.
Yeah.
And there'll be more.
Yeah.
SpaceX and Virgin Galactic are not the only players. SpaceX is going, for orbit. There's a company in Virginia, Orbital Sciences. They're building their own spaceship as well. It's not right now. It's not for people. But Boeing, they want to build their own spaceship. Lockheed Martin is building hoping to build a private version of their spaceship. Mm-hmm. And there's a whole slew of folks who, once it's proven, are going to probably come out of the woodwork as well with future designs, so that the opportunity would be there in the next 10 years, in the next 15, for other folks who aren't millionaires,
Right.
who maybe aren't high hundreds of thousands, a year, can get at least a taste of it. What I found really interesting in 2010 was the spate of folks who figured out how to take pictures of space from the park. They got a weather balloon, an iPhone, and a GPS, and they stuck the whole thing together and just let it go. And it goes all the way up to the edge of space. Well, maybe not all the way to the edge of space, but
Pretty high.
When you see the curve of the Earth and nothing but black, for most people, to them, you're seeing space, and that's enough for them. And that it was just amazing to see. I think 5, 10, 15 reports of these people that just for fun went out and did it, and then got the pictures back. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, and it's getting a weather balloon and getting your iPhone or some other device that can record. It makes it something that school kids can do.
Exactly. When I was little, we bought those model rockets and just lit them off from the school parking lot. And this is like taking that almost to an entirely new level.
Yeah. There was something this year, this last year, 2010, that school kids made a pretty interesting discovery, didn't they? There was not related to weather balloons and iPhones, but there were 7th graders that discovered a cave on Mars.
That's right. Yeah. There are a couple of them. There was the 7th graders who discovered a cave on Mars by going through pictures of Mars taken by a NASA spacecraft, and they just spotted a pit, let NASA know. NASA was like, "Wow, hey, there's this cave on Mars that we didn't even know," and that was a really kind of neat thing that the NASA found out about, that folks are using their data for teaching, and they're actually finding things that NASA might have missed. In fact, there's a few things. I think there was a crater in Africa that was discovered by someone using Google Maps. There was a kid in the eastern coast who discovered a pulsar. And this week we found out about a girl in Canada who discovered a rare supernova. So the interest seems to be there among the younger generation. And NASA has made a lot of progress in terms of social media to try to at least get them more interested or just pay attention to what's available for consumption, for interest, for professions.
Yeah, and also for just making data available. Whereas once data was held back behind a confidentiality wall where only the scientists involved in the studies could access it, now suddenly all these images are being made available to the public. Reams of just data are being made available for people who are interested in number crunching.
Exactly.
There was, I think I read something just recently that there was like some, not a janitor, but just some guy, it's not a kid, but it was some guy who just had a job, got a telescope, was interested in some stuff, and just started number crunching and made a discovery.
Yeah, in the UK. There's a guy with a telescope, looking at the stars, and helped discover some extrasolar planets, which they just announced, I think, earlier this week. And it's nice to know that there are folks that still do that still look up at the sky, given everything else that you can pay attention to these days.
Yeah, that you can still see it.
That's right.
Yeah, with the data side of things, I mean, over the 10 years that you've been working at space.com, have these kinds of discoveries, the amateur scientist, amateur astronomer discoveries, have they seemed to become more and more prevalent?
It seems that they get noticed more, largely because the pace of science has quickened up a bit. The access the process from discovery to everyone knowing about it is so much faster now. I think in the last couple of years, some of the biggest, most exciting things that have happened in our own solar system were spotted by amateur astronomers first, and then the professional space agencies followed it up. What I'm thinking about primarily is some stuff has been hitting Jupiter over the last couple of years. It seems to be more often, but it could just be that these guys are watching Jupiter a lot more closely. There's some folks in Australia and the Philippines they're always looking at Jupiter because they love the planet. They post the pictures, and then lo and behold, they see a big bright fireball on the planet. Then that gets out. Everyone swings the cameras that way, and they caught them actually happening, which is just amazing. In the last couple of years.
Yeah, I love that the speed of stuff can make such observations and discoveries possible, whereas before, just because we didn't have the communications, we didn't have the technology quite as advanced, it just wasn't possible.
And one thing that is on the social side of it all that's really cool is that NASA, has digital cameras in space right now on the space station. There's 6 astronauts on the space station right now, and they're taking photos of everything from playing around in zero gravity to the Earth's auroras from space and whatnot. And now they tweet all that stuff. These great pictures. They posted a photo of what lightning looks like from space. I've never seen a still photo of that in a long time ever, and I saw that this week. And that's just pretty amazing because it gets that message out there. And it's stuff that maybe in the past you saw 1 out of every 100 or 10 of those photos. And now you can see every one as they're sending these things down. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. There was another, 2010, another interesting observation by amateur space watchers, the secret space plane. What was it, the X-37, or was that?
The X-37B. In fact, the second one. The second secret one is supposedly going to launch sometime in the next couple of months. The Air Force had launched this secret plane in April, and it's unmanned, robotic. It looks like a little tiny space shuttle. It even has its own cargo bay on the back there. And the thing launched in April. It went up and did whatever it was going to do, and it came back down in early December. And in the middle of all that time, the Air Force didn't really say anything about what they were doing. Yeah. But these amateur sky watchers, these are guys that track satellites overhead for fun.
They're like, what was that?
That's right. They found it. They found out that it was moving around up there and changing its orbit, which is a pretty amazing feat. It's really hard to do. And then they were able to pick it up again. So, without those folks keeping an eye on space, we wouldn't have known what was going on at all because it's a classified project.
Right.
And it was a successful project too. The same thing happened with a couple of China satellites. China had a couple of satellites. Some of these same skywatchers watched them get closer and closer with each other, and then apparently they bumped into each other in some sort of rendezvous test. Another thing that the general public wouldn't have known about if these amateur skywatchers had not said, "Hey, look what we found in space."
So let's think about what people can look forward to this year, 2011. What's on the calendar? There's some big events for January, specifically this month. If people can keep things in their head, let's shorten the attention span time period that they have to worry about it. Like just for January, what do we should we be looking out for on our horizon?
Well, this week has already kicked off the month at a breakneck speed. We had a meteor shower and a solar eclipse all in the same day on Tuesday.
Yeah.
And so we're kind of already chugging along. But this week sees kind of a couple or this month sees a few kind of historical landmarks. At the end of this month, in January 28th, which I'll remember because that's my wedding anniversary. So I can't forget that.
Don't forget. Yeah.
NASA is going to mark the 25th anniversary of the Challenger accident. It's kind of a big year for the shuttle program because not only is this a big anniversary of one of the most shocking, I think, accidents that NASA has had, but it's happening in a year where the shuttle fleet is retiring. It's the 30th anniversary of the shuttle program, and it's the 50th anniversary of human spaceflight. So it's kind of everything coming to a head. And this is the first major anniversary for the Apollo 1 fires the day before in 1967, and then a couple of days afterwards, the Columbia tragedy anniversary on February 1st. So it's a very somber time for NASA, at least, as they're preparing for their first space shuttle mission of the year, which is the Shuttle Discovery, supposedly to launch at the end of January or early February. I think they're looking at February 3rd right now. It could shift. They're having some problems with the external tank again. They're making repairs. So one thing to watch is what NASA is going to do with the shuttle program. they have to get ready for Discovery's last flight. Endeavour is slated to fly in April, and then maybe another one after that. And Congress, the new Congress, just took charge of in Washington, and they're the ones holding the keys to the future of NASA's spaceflight program, of the budgets that are going to be passed to make it all possible.
Right. So the question now is, can we get through this year with no mishaps? Can NASA actually get their shuttles launched, Discovery and Endeavour, have the missions occur without any problems, so that we can have a very end the shuttle program on a very positive high note? Mm-hmm. And then where is it going to go in the future? People are looking at the budget, and things have to be cut. So is there any kind of talk that you know of as to which way things might go in Washington this year?
Well, I know that they're kind of frozen right now at 2010 funding levels. I think that if they're able to get some kind of agreement in place before it's time for the next budget cycle, around February, March timeframe, the idea would be that there's going to be a compromise between the president's plan and what maybe the stalwarts in Congress have been pushing for, which is a little bit more of the old Constellation Moon plan. I think in the next couple of weeks that might shake out as the new Congress kind of flexes its muscles and folks get down to the nitty gritty on funding plans for not just NASA but for the country overall.
Yeah, hopefully the budgets won't get cut too much for NASA. I think NASA has been doing some amazing work over the last few years, especially on the research front, in terms of maybe the large scale projects have been running over budget. Telescopes that are launched into space, satellites, missions to other planets. They're kind of big budget items. They take years and years, sometimes decades, to actually get to the point of launching and initiating the mission. But at the same time, NASA's just been rolling out. They've gotten so great at, like you said, social media, their PR, just getting people to know that, hey, we're an organization that's doing really good work.
That's right. And one of the I think there are big shining examples of that is the popular Mars rovers that are exploring the red planet right now. There's this month is of course the birthday of the Spirit and Opportunity rovers on Mars. This week, Spirit marked its seventh birthday of landing anniversary on Mars. Opportunity, around the middle of the month of January, will begin its 8th year on Mars at a new crater that it's arrived at called Santa Maria. They're still chugging along now, 7 years after their 90-day mission. 3 months ended. So then that's pretty amazing. And 2011 is going to see another Mars rover, an ambitious one. It's called the Mars Science Laboratory, or Curiosity.
Yeah, they're launching it in 2011, right? Yeah,
and this is it's much larger than the rovers. It has a nuclear power source to run a lot longer, so it doesn't have to rely on the sunlight. And it'll arrive probably in early 2012, if not late 2011, and begin maybe what would be a more ambitious mission to try to find out maybe more about where life could exist on Mars, what things are like across larger distances, because it can go farther. And that would be pretty exciting to see as well.
Is it pretty well agreed at this point in time that there's water on Mars, and that there is this signature of life, that there's methane coming from the surface of the planet, that there are compounds in the atmosphere that could come from natural chemical processes, but could also come from biological processes? Are we like really looking at, hey, there might be life still on Mars?
Yeah, and that's where like the last 2 years kind of complement each other, because what we found out in 2010 is that 30 years ago, when NASA's Viking probes landed on Mars, they have little ovens to look out for organic types of molecules, things that could be the building blocks of life. That they actually found what would be kind of the precursors, the raw ingredients, if you will, for some kind of microbial or primitive life. to exist. They found that 30 years ago. At the time, there was a lot of debate about it because no one really could agree on whether or not they actually found it, or if it was a bad signal, or if there was another problem with the instrument. And it's been going on, that debate, for some 30 years. And now they're saying at the end of 2010 that, that they found these organic molecules. It could be some kind of ingredient for life. It could help. It could make the case, if you will, that there's something primitive there. Maybe the water story is definite. They found water. They found water ice, pardon me, buried underneath the soil with the Phoenix mission in 2008. In 2009, they just keep, building the case that there was water in at least the ancient past. There could be water buried somewhere deep down in caches below, using the radar from orbiting spacecraft. So I think they've got that pretty well locked, and they're just trying to build that story more with the new probes that they send out, with the new orbiters that they're planning to send.
Yeah, I'm always looking forward to hearing more. I mean, Mars has been, this planet of interest since we started looking at it years ago with telescopes, and that face on Mars first appeared. Okay, so there's no advanced alien civilization on Mars that we've found so far that could have carved a face into the surface of Mars. That doesn't exist, but maybe we're looking at bacterial, microbial life that exists there. And then if we do find that, how is it related to life on our own planet? Which came first? Are they separate? Are they related? There's so many interesting questions that just expand from the possibility of little tiny microbes existing in the crust of Mars.
Yeah, and if they find any kind of evidence, obviously, on Mars, there's a whole slew of other environments to look for in our solar system that are even better candidates than Mars would be today, where they know that there's water around Saturn's moon, Enceladus, for example. Yeah. That thing is spitting out water every single day.
Jets of it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they think that they have to have water that have some kind of life on Earth, so that, maybe that's a good place to go look. And there's other moons that are like that maybe the chances of something to be found are a lot higher at that point.
Yeah. What about Venus? Now, Venus is considered, the twin, Earth's twin. That it's an example of a runaway greenhouse effect. That it has this thick atmosphere. The Russians landed a probe on the surface that melted almost immediately years ago. So we have images and data from going through the atmosphere, information a little bit about the surface of Venus. The Japanese were trying to get a probe there and then lost it in 2010. It just kind of transited behind a planet and they couldn't regain contact. And I read they're going to have to take 6 years. It's going to be 6 years before they can try again to actually.
They're hoping to cut that down to 5 years.
Okay, hope so.
But it was certainly kind of a disappointing end to the year, especially one that saw a flawless launch of that spacecraft, the Akatsuki spacecraft. Venus is often overlooked, it would seem, in terms of like the planets of the solar system, because, as you mentioned, Russia landed a probe there decades ago. There's those famous photos of the footpad on Venus before the thing crushed and melted under the extreme pressure there.
Exactly.
And Europe has had a spacecraft in orbit around Venus since 2004, the Venus Express probe, and that thing has just been cranking out wonders since it's been there, real quietly in the background. It was the first one to visit Venus since Magellan, NASA's Magellan spacecraft in the late 20th century. So if they can get the Japanese probe back online and it's still working all right in 5 or 6 years and it arrives back at Venus, it could find some groundbreaking stuff. That spacecraft is equipped with ultra high resolution cameras, state-of-the-art stuff, much better than what Venus Express has there.
Yeah, which in 5 years people will be going, that's old news technology.
That's right. That's the curse of launching stuff, and it takes years to get there.
Yeah, this Japanese probe is it's our best. It's the best thing, or the next big probe that we would have looking at Venus, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So there's nothing else except for the European satellite that's just taking
not that
data.
I can think of right now. Although there have been some kind of studies at NASA, just quiet ones, not approved for anything real big, about how to kind of take a Venus exploration mission to the next level in terms of like a whole package deal with an orbiter, with a balloon of some sort, and then maybe some kind of lander or rover. There's a paper study sometime in mid 2010 about how that could work. Would you use a solar powered plane? Would it even be able to work in the atmosphere because it's so windy? Venus has this super rotation of extremely fast winds, and it's 800 degrees on that planet. I mean, it's just a very scary place to try to send a spacecraft, let alone people, in the future.
Yeah, I don't know that I think I'd choose Mars before Venus if I had to choose a mission to go on.
What is another planet that gets overlooked and that's going to probably take center stage this coming year in 2011 is Mercury. It's the closest planet to the sun. It's cooked all day on one side. The night side is always super cold, and they think that maybe at the poles there could be craters like on the moon that might have water ice in them. And NASA has this spacecraft Messenger, which has swung past Mercury a few times in the last couple of years. And in 2011, it's supposed to actually arrive, I believe.
Oh wow! So we could be getting some really interesting data back about Mercury. That's right.
I mean, I don't think they've ever had an orbiter go to Mercury. They've had some flybys in the past, but this would be kind of due for Mercury what the lost Japanese probe would do for Venus.
Right. I'm just trying to think about what kind of conditions a probe or a craft that would go into orbit around Mercury or would fly very close to Mercury would have to put up with.
It has
being that close to the sun would be some pretty serious business.
It is covered by this great big sun shield, which basically is baking hot from the sun on one side, and right on the other side, it's room temperature. Basically, like what it feels like in your studio, or if you have really bad air conditioning or really good air conditioning, what it's like in my office here.
Right.
So it's a pretty amazing thing that they've gotten there. Of course, they have to enter orbit, and we hope that what happened to the Japanese probe doesn't happen to that one.
Yeah. Fingers crossed that we can actually get around Mercury and get some really interesting information, because that is one of the planets that we know very little about, because it is so far away and so close to the sun and just difficult to access. In other kind of offbeat space news, 2010 also had there were the nail in the coffin of Planet X, of the so-called dark planet that people have been supposing is in somewhere in orbit around the sun that would mess up orbits and screw things up for everybody at some point.
The Nemesis planet, the one that's out there lurking.
The Nemesis, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fun that the astronomers have been looking for Nemesis for a long time to try to explain why certain things are in the solar system, why they're the way they are, or what kind of gave some of the outer planets their weird orbits. And it seems like they've had at least some success in weeding out what it can't be, because they haven't found it yet. They think that it might have basically created the comets that come from the Oort cloud into the system, that might have been attributed to this Nemesis way back when, but they still haven't really pinned it down. So right now they think that maybe it's not there. However, there's still a faction that is holding out hope that they're going to find it one of these days. Yes,
there are people holding out hope, but there are many astronomers and cosmologists who are saying, it doesn't really seem like it's scientifically possible. So there is always hope for those of you who want a Nemesis planet.
The comet, I think the comet rain was the most convincing study that I saw in the last year, that the thing had some kind of influence at all. But there were several stories about, it's there, no, it's not.
Right.
Maybe.
In terms of the sun, 2012 is supposed to be the year of high solar activity. 2011, and we did have some serious solar flares in 2010. Is 2011 expected to be an increasing year of activity for the sun? Is it? Are we on? Is it not increasing as much as expected?
Well, the sun should be increasing in activity in the next year because, as you mentioned, in 2010, the sun kind of reawoken out of its extremely long lull in its solar weather activity. The sun has an 11-year solar weather cycle when it kind of hits a peak and then it drops back down. And we're at a point in it where it's really kind of awoken up. It's going strong. I think in early December or mid-December, we had a really strong geomagnetic storm on Earth that was created from a flare that the sun kicked out. Some real strong ones between September and November as well from the sun. So that was a real kind of shift in the sun's behavior. And by 2012, it should kind of hit that high again of the cycle before it starts to calm back down. And so they're expecting a rise in activity, some hopefully stunning northern lights or southern light shows for folks at the poles. To see the aurora that's created by that weather. And hopefully there's a good monitoring system in place to protect satellites and astronauts in space.
Yeah. Well, we're coming to the end of the hour here, and I'm just wondering if there's anything else in terms of what's going to be happening in 2011 that you think is important for people to have on their radar.
Aside from the shuttle program and the human spaceflight part of it all, there's some really neat stuff that's going on. There's going to be an asteroid arrival. NASA's Dawn spacecraft in the middle of the year is going to arrive at the second largest asteroid in the solar system, Vesta. So they're getting ready for that. There's some comet rendezvous in the next couple months. NASA's Stardust spacecraft will visit its second comet. And there's a few other just kind of really neat missions that are slated to launch. NASA will send a new probe to the moon. Actually, 2 new missions to the moon. A new mission to Jupiter, the Juno mission, to go orbit Jupiter. It's the first dedicated orbiter since Galileo in the 90s, and ended its flight, I think, in 2001. So a lot of really kind of exciting stuff in our own solar system, let alone more progress on bigger, ambitious telescopes, that type of thing.
There's so much stuff to look at. The launches are for me interesting because that's the first step. It's like, okay, you've built whatever the exploratory equipment is. Now, can you get it off this rock without it blowing up?
That's right.
Can you first just get it out of our gravity well, and then from there, can we watch the journey? That's when we don't really hear much from these expeditions. It's just kind of quiet for a number of years until suddenly it's like, oh, they're almost arriving at their destination, almost arriving at Venus, almost arriving at Jupiter, or wherever it is. And for Saturn, the Cassini mission, since they arrived a few years ago, it's just been amazing data pouring out of that mission. It's just I not a week goes by that I don't get something in my mailbox or see something in the news about Saturn and the moons of Saturn.
That's right. I mean, there are spacecraft at so many different spots in our solar system right now. The Pioneer spacecraft are leaving the solar system. The Voyager spacecraft are leaving the solar system. Cassini is at Saturn. There's the New Horizons probe chugging along
almost to Venus. Not Venus, Pluto, right?
That's right. By I think 2015 or so, it'll swing past Pluto. But it's been making steady progress, and a lot of those milestones are going to come out in 2011. That there's no people on them, but they're going to send back some amazing photos of just the place that we live, our neighborhood in space, and it's worth taking a look.
Yeah. What are the planets in your neighborhood? In your neighborhood, we could have the Sesame Street of space with all these mission photos. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Tariq. It's been a lot of fun talking with you. You're a font of knowledge and information about what's going on in the local universe, in space, and I appreciate you taking the time to join us this morning.
Well, thanks for having us, and we're looking forward to 2011 as well.
Yeah, looking forward to it, definitely. Thanks, everybody, for watching. If you would like more information, Tariq Malik is the managing editor at space.com. You can go to space.com. There's some big stories always coming up there. Great website, great resource for people who are interested in what's happening in space. So I urge you to check out that website and find out more about your neighborhood, your solar system neighborhood. That's it for Dr. Kiki's Science Hour today. We'll be back next week at our regular time, 4 to 5 p.m. Pacific time on Thursdays on the TWIT network. We're going to be talking with Dr. Chris Impey about astrobiology, so the possibility of life in the universe. We're moving on from the rocks in space and the probes and missions and things that we can look at to the big questions of what actually might be out there and how do we know that it's out there? What kind of questions can we ask there? I hope that you join us again next week. Thank you so much for joining us this week. I am Dr. Kiki. You can find me online on Twitter. I'm at Dr. Kiki, DRKIKI. You can download past episodes of this show at the TWIT network, twit.tv/Kiki, Kiki, and all sorts of other things. If you need more sciencey goodness than that, you can also listen to This Week in Science. This Week in Science is a show that airs here live Thursday nights at 7:30 p.m. Pacific time. It's also available if you go to twist.org, twis.org. Lots of great science news out there for your science bone. You fill your science life, right? Right? Exactly. All right, everyone. Thank you for joining me this hour. And if nothing else, I hope this hour of science and space talk made your world, universe, a whole lot more interesting. See you next week.